pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to our September 12th Tiverton School Committee meeting. No one has signed up for open forum. I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'd like to make a motion to remove item 5B2 from the consent agenda. Second.
For purposes of discussion?
Yes, I just have a question.
Okay. All those in favor? I'll entertain a motion to approve the remainder of the consent agenda.
Motion to approve the remainder of the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Mrs. Papo?
Mr. Rearick, 5B2.
You're not live.
I'm sorry. Item 5B2, in the packet, there wasn't a certification.
Persons,
A certificate, I mean.
Persons, that's why we're hiring them as a long-term substitute, because under Rhode Island law, they have a college degree.
Okay.
And we're seeking emergency certification for that
All
person.
right, thank you. That's all.
Okay.
That's it. So we should,
Okay, can I have a motion to approve item 5.2b from the consent agenda? 5B2, sorry.
Second.
All those in favor? Okay.
Dr. Black?
Yes, Mrs. Black.
Yes, I'd like to say thank you to all the people that are resigning, and especially to Mrs. Larson, who is the College and Career Readiness Coordinator, and for all the hard work she did in, with Project Lead the Way, and cybersecurity, Cyber Patriots, CPERT. I mean, it was incredible, the contact she has on the state level, and it's going to be very, very difficult to replace you.
There she is.
But I hope that we can put that on our next agenda soon to fill that position, because with our new standards and strains, it's going to be very important, that college and career pathways. But thank you, Mrs. Larson, for all your work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Linda.
Yes, Mrs. Larson, thank you very much. And I expect we will be having that on an agenda, as an agenda item sometime in the near future.
Thank you.
Okay, correspondence. We have.
Would you like me to read the names?
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Just trying to move fast.
Resignations, retirements, leaves of absence. Technology teacher, Tiverton Middle School, Thomas Norris. Library media aide at the elementary school, Donna Macumber. And the 3 is there because she serves all 3 schools. We don't have 3 people, just to clarify that. College and Career Readiness Coordinator, Linda Larson. Appointments, reading specialist, Tiverton High School, Judith Almy Kutu. Long-term substitute teacher at THS and MHS, TMS, Kimberly Brayton. Part-time lunch recess office TA, Picassett, Amy Paul. Head girls field hockey coach, Lauren Tavares. First grade bubble teacher, Picassett, Brittany Edwards.
Okay, thank you. Correspondence, we have a letter from the Tiverton Library telling us about the participation in the summer reading program, which sounds like it was a resounding success. And that brings us to old business. Request for middle school co-ed soccer team approval.
Yes, since our last meeting, or at our last meeting, we asked Ms. Slopes to provide certain information for us. One of them was, did the Rhode Island Interscholastic League, would they allow us to compete as a team? We received an email from Mr. Campion from the Interscholastic League saying that we would be allowed to scrimmage other teams for the 2017 season. So that was our first, one of our first requests for information. We also, there was a discussion about whether or not how students could be transported, and we did get an email from the trust, which I provided in your packet, which explained the criteria that the district would have to follow if they wanted students to be transported privately by parents to events. I also included a letter of intent. We have 2 volunteers who expressed interest in co-coaching the team, and I included their emails. And also an email from me to Mrs. Lopes outlining the information that was going to be required. And one of the things that I stated in that email was that the school committee needed to see that funds were raised to pay for the league fees. They wouldn't have to pay for it because they're already paid for because we pay for cross-country and basketball, so there would be no additional league fee. But we did ask about uniforms, we did ask about referees, and the question of transportation still needs to be addressed by the committee.
So if so it's referees, transportation, and uniforms that are the outstanding issue at this
Yes.
point?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Lopes and Mrs. Zimic. Why do I keep on seeing you places?
It's similar to the agenda of last time, but everything is actually resolved. We had a parent donation, and actually I got another one when I came in. So we have over $540 for the uniforms, which we were already told by Silver Design that that's going to cover the uniform for all the students. They're looking at doing either home and away jerseys and/or just the reversible pennies. The busing, we raised $2,350, and the busing is about 22. So we have an extra 150 that I thought would go towards the referees until I spoke with each individual athletic director. I talked to Middletown, Portsmouth, Kickamuit, and I'm trying to figure, Little Compton, as well as I talked to Mr. Campion, who is the athletic director for Newport, and they all agreed to incur the fee for refs for us.
Very
So,
nice, yeah.
and another thing that came up was that they said that because we are entered into the scrimmage season, that they're actually looking, some of them are actually looking for high schoolers that have the day off or that are certified refs that can volunteer and get community service, so they're not going to incur the fee as well for referees. And another option, too, was we have 2 volunteer coaches. One can coach while the other can ref because it is a scrimmage season.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So I believe that the 150 towards refs that we have is extra. If we don't have to pay that, that can go in towards next year. So I have everything here now and would like to thank, as you can see at the end, Stonebridge Associates, the Fishbowl, Gilbert's Jewelers, Brent, I always butcher this.
Osiminski.
Gus, thank you. Chip Craig, and also Senator Edwards and Senator Phelan. And a lot of them are actually sustainable donations, and they said that it would actually help out again next year.
Very good.
So I have it all here. I know Mr. Rarick said that he wouldn't mind taking it and holding it to the safe and dispersing it where it needs to go so
Okay,
that they can begin their
the money
season.
actually flows through the district.
Mhm.
Well done. So at this point, we need a motion, I guess. I'll entertain a motion for approval.
Well, you had a motion, at the last meeting.
To move forward,
To-
but I think we
With
have,
a 1 year,
1 year.
it was a 1 year provisional with the that these requirements were met, right?
okay.
So I think that, I don't know if that still stands. I
think
think
we
you've
have
got to
to-
vote on that.
I think we have to vote
I think
again
that's what
that-
you're
that-
voting on,
That the requirements have been
have been met.
met. So
No,
Mrs.
you-
Black has made the
Yeah,
motion.
make
I
it again.
second it.
Yes.
Is there a second? Is there any discussion?
Just quick, I'm assuming because it looks like both of these coaches are with Tiverton Youth Soccer or another league that, you're Corey checked for youth soccer, right?
Yes.
They have-
The
yeah.
coaches would have to, they've submitted it to me, but we would request that they do a BCI
Right.
check,
Well-
like we would for all our coaches.
Mr. Mello is
I believe
already
our
BCI.
volunteer coach already coaches for us, so he will
Right.
probably be, already has it on file.
Okay.
So it would be Mr. Costa who we would need one from.
Okay. And yes, they do go through background checks. I'm not sure if
On
it's the
those
exact
two
same
anyway,
one.
It's not the same. It's
Right.
code. I don't want to say because I don't know Tiverton, but other youth leagues just do what we do for volunteers.
Right.
They just check the social security number and run it through Rhode
DOB,
Island's.
yeah.
We run it through the nationwide.
Which but we'll get those, I'm sure
Yes,
it's
we'll get
easy.
those,
Yeah,
yes.
okay.
Okay. And Mr. Eric, you're satisfied that the requirements have been met, and
I believe they have been, yes. Yes, I'm satisfied.
any other discussion?
I just want to commend Mrs. Lopes for putting in this much hard work for something that is really clearly meaningful to her. And I'm sure that a number of students will benefit from this, and I do applaud you for the hard work.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, congratulations, and now we have to work on sustainability. So, all those in favor? Opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeanette.
And now to new business, Newport County Regional Special Education Program Audit.
Yes, again, I emailed you the electronic version because it came to us a little late after our packets went out on Friday. Then we delivered the hard copies to you yesterday, and I didn't know if you would bring them or not, so Sarah also gave you hard copies today. So you should have plenty of copies of the report.
Plenty of copies. We have time to read it.
Here's the PowerPoint presentation. Sarah Krager, our regional director, will go through, summarize the report. And again, for folks at home, they not understand what this is about. Last school year, the Board of Superintendents authorized the approval of a program audit
Maybe it's a little different.
to be formed by Futures,
Thank you.
which is a consulting firm, to do an analysis of our regional special ed program to see whether or not what we're doing is in the best interest of students, whether we have good sound programming, plus is it cost effective. So with that in mind, we brought Futures in. They did their audit. Mr. Richard Labrie is here from First Student Futures. Rich is right there in the front row, next to Mary Sherber, our assistant director. So I'm going to turn it over right now to Sarah, and she'll walk you through the summary, and then we'll open it up to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Eric. Thank you for doing the introductions too of Mr. Labrie and Ms. Serber. Mr. Labrie and I will kind of tag team on this presentation. The program evaluation itself that you have with you is quite lengthy and goes over some of those hardcore numbers. This is more a summary of what we have in that. I will just note, Mr. Eric, that there is an error on page 29, so we will send you a new copy tomorrow morning to be used as the final. So what we're just going to present today, usually I come in and do an overview of the region and give you an update of where our regional programs are located and the schools in Tiverton that are host some of those regional programs. So I'm just going to review that quickly, and then I'll get into the findings of the evaluation summary. You saw a similar graph like this one last year. We just did some updates, some of the new programs in the region that serve our regional students this year. We did include a preschool program for Little Compton over at Wilbur McMahon. We started that last year, but officially put it in this year. And also we moved one of our programs from Ranger School to Fort Barton School, and that's the kindergarten grade 1-2 intensive class. So other than that, the programs have remained the same are the same locations.
Sarah, can you just explain to the committee what Project Search is?
Yes, I think we reviewed that last year. Project Search is our new program we created in collaboration with Office of Rehabilitation Services and the Newport Hospital, where we have 7 students this year. Last year we had 5. We have 7 students this year who serve as interns at Newport Hospital. They work alongside colleagues at the Newport Hospital, and it's really a transition program for students with learning disabilities or intellectual disabilities. At the end of the full year and after 3 rotations of internships, the students, all 5 of our students last year who were in the program were fully employed at the end of the program and continue employment to date. So we're excited to have 7 interns this year, and there are 2 students from Tiverton who are currently in that program. So we would love to bring them at some point to the school committee so you can see what that looks like in action.
Be nice.
The service delivery in Tiverton Public Schools, you saw some of the regional programs in the previous graph. This also indicates the number of special education teachers in addition to those regional programs at each of the buildings. So as we get into the evaluation report, like Superintendent Rurick said, we did hire futures back in March. They started pretty quickly after they were hired and did an extensive review of IEPs, our financial pieces. They came into the schools, talked to principals, central office, special ed teachers, regular ed teachers, teacher assistants. They really did a thorough study, and that's what we will report our findings on today. So our first question was, are we providing quality service to our students throughout the regional programs? And based on some of those IEPs and staff interviews, those did show that quality services are being provided throughout the region. In addition to that, we did look at state performance plan indicators, looking at students with disabilities and how they are served across the district, and we have some data to support how those quality programs are being provided. So the first piece of data that we'll show you is just one of our state performance indicators, is that we want the majority of our students with learning disabilities or with disabilities spending at least 80% of their time in the general education classroom. What we did here was show you not only how Tiverton, Middletown, and Little Compton compare to the state, but we also looked at districts who are neighboring districts or districts that are comparable in size to our 3 districts in the region. So you can see there that we are performing in that area at or above where the state is, and very similar to the comparable districts. In addition to that, we can use park data to quantify how some of our services are being provided. If you remember, some of you who were on the committee a couple years ago, one of the region's goals was to really work on creating measurable goals for students, and measurable goals are goals that are academic goals and functional goals. When those are done and done well and measurable, the instruction that is provided is good instruction and focused instruction. Based on some of that data, what we have seen from that is that we've really received some nice scores through the park data. And again, that's not the only thing we look at, but it is one thing we can quantify. So just this graph just shows how many students with disabilities take part in the park assessments or the state assessments. So you can see the state average there, and then the averages for Little Compton, Tiverton, and Middletown. The next 2 charts, we are very proud to report on the performance of students with disabilities on those tests. Again, we included the same districts, neighboring districts, and similar districts to compare. But you can see here that when we look at students with disabilities in our 3 districts, they are faring very well in our park math results. We included the not just met or exceeding, but we did include the approached in there as well, because we know students with disabilities do have difficulties in the academic class. But you can see there, really we are outperforming certainly the state, and then if you look at those districts, we are also outperforming those districts. So that is huge kudos to the teams that are developing first the IEPs, including families, and kudos to the regular and special education teachers who are providing the instruction every day. Similarly, in the ELA and literacy results, we see same pattern. Again, you look at the state and what students with disabilities, the percentage there, and again, comparable to the districts, we are faring very well at or above those. So another congratulations to those teams working with the students. So based on that, as well as some of additional information in the full report, we certainly, there is evidence that supports that the services being provided is quality instruction, quality services. I think we who are in it every day felt like that was the case, but it is nice to have that validated as well. The second driving question then is, if what we're doing is good quality, is it also cost effective and fiscally responsible? Mr. Labrie is going to tag team on me here, with me here. Do you want to just go up to that one? The first graph shows what we wanted to show was just a 5-year trend on our budget, our regional budget. And we included the year 1 and 2 were 2 years where Portsmouth was with us, and then when Portsmouth withdrew, because I think some of the questions were when Portsmouth withdrew, how much did it affect our regional budget? So now we have a couple years to look at and to see that trend, and as you can see, the fluctuation is minimal. Certainly the fluctuation is based on students coming in and out of the District 2 and how we can serve them. Some of that we can predict, and other parts of that we can't predict just because of the fluidity of that.
What we saw specifically is that the budget changes between the 3 districts were more a result of the 3-year averages of enrollment and how that was distributed between the 3 districts, as opposed to just straight budget increases overall. With respect to financial management, we looked at several audits, and we took some information from the latest one because it was representative of the previous years, but it showed that at the end of fiscal year 2016, that services was $4.5 million in terms of the cost. The revenues were $5 million. And the revenue was derived primarily from district assessments, Medicaid reimbursement revenue, preschool tuitions, and federal grants that are passed through the districts to the regional program to operate. In fiscal 16, the regional program operated at a surplus of $603,000. Prior to any transfers to OPEB or to any types of credits or transfers back to the town. Actual revenues were only $102,000 more than what they budgeted, but the total expenditures were $501,000 less than what they had budgeted. And so we looked at the end of the year report for fiscal 2017, this past June. Again, that's unaudited, so that figure may change, but it showed that the total revenues exceeded their total expenditures by $252,000 and change. All good indicators of sound financial management. Also corresponding to the audit, there were no identified weaknesses in accounting, and there were no material weaknesses and no instances of non-compliance with either state accounting or with federal grant accounting requirements. And it's commendable that although with relatively little cash, because the regional program operates with very little cash, that they've been able to manage their expenditures over the past several years, sometimes relying on fund balance, but typically they rely on Medicaid revenue that they manage. And so therefore, based on our review of both audited financial statements, other financial reports, and information, we were able to conclude that the regional program appears to be financially well managed.
Can you go back to your last 2 slides for a second?
I'm sorry?
Can you go back to your last 2 slides? That one, and then the one following this.
Before
No,
that one and this one?
this one.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll go back to this first.
Explain the relationship between those two, where one is 12 million and one is 4.5 million.
Oh, the total budget of the region includes all of the expenses that are incurred or incurred in your budget.
Right.
They're your special ed program. They employ and they manage all of that. The audit of the 5 million is only the portion that we would call the regional part of the budget, which is the program services that are not paid for as part of your budget, but are included in their budget and then get reassessed back to the member districts.
Those would be mostly the shared services, admin costs.
Right, okay. So I just wanted to gloss that a little bit.
I'm sorry, the 12 million is our total cost.
Right.
With 5 million being the regional shared cost.
The regional,
Okay, the
regional.
regional cost.
And that 12 million includes all 3 districts,
Total.
of
Correct.
which 4.5 million or 5 million is the cost of the project, so it's rather heterogeneous, I guess is the point I'm making
Yeah.
here. That some of the cost is actually reflected in the district budget and some of it is reflected in that $5 million.
Correct.
That's the
Correct.
regions.
And as
budget.
part of their budgeting and assessment process, they credit the district with the expenses that are in your
So you have
budget.
to look for the money in different places.
Correct.
Got it.
And Mr. Larkin, something on this one too, did you want to?
Nope, that was it.
Okay, that was it, okay. Mr. Labrie, before you go to alternatives, I just wanted to publicly speak on behalf of the teachers or celebrate with the teachers and the principals. One of the messages that Mr. Neiman, one of the Futures staff people who did the evaluation, he called and said to me, Sarah, I've just got to tell you, I have seen tens of thousands of IEPs in all of the evaluations that I do throughout the nation. He said the IEPs that I've seen from the region are perhaps the most consistent and most measurable IEPs that he's seen. So that is a huge celebration for our teachers and our principals. I know serve as LEA at some of those meetings, so they're probably making sure that they're measurable too, but it's certainly something to celebrate.
Could we, before we go on, could we go back to that chart again? So you basically, we didn't see the budgets go down, so there was no economies of scale from having all of the additional students from Portsmouth.
No. No.
No,
No.
there was not.
Okay.
But I think what's more important with that slide, go back to it again, is that you were not adversely affected with the withdrawal of Portsmouth.
Yeah.
Your budgets remain relatively stable and your assessments
And again,
were
at the
relatively
time,
stable.
and we had those conversations, we were unsure at the time what the impact would be, and because it's 3 years out now, the data shows that, there
Right.
was,
Well,
the impact was minimal,
And they
if
were
at all.
convinced they were going to save money, and I guess that's not
Right.
really the case either.
Now, again, if the member school districts were to withdraw from the region, or if the regional program were to terminate its existence, what would need to happen is each of the member school districts would have to develop their own special education department, staff it appropriately, and then would have a choice of either developing programs in-house to serve the students that the regional program serves, or outsource those students. And we looked at the cost of both alternatives. One of the concerns we had with regard to Tiverton in particular is that when I met with your principals in June and looked at their space utilization of their building, there was no age-appropriate classrooms available for additional programs. And I'm assuming now that school started and they're here, that case remains the same, that there would be no additional space. In fact, some of your schools don't have adequate space for the things they're already doing, much
Can I-
less,
Can I ask you about that?
yes.
I'm trying to understand what
where are they all?
additional space would be required
Yeah,
for
me
students
too.
we already serve.
Are they all
These,
in Little
there's
Compton?
students that you serve that are located in programs outside your district in Middletown and Little Compton that you would be bringing back.
How many would that be?
And what programs are those? That's what we're just trying to
They-
We
understand.
So some of those regional programs that I showed you on the first slide,
Yeah,
those regional programs have students could have students from Tiverton, Little Compton, or Middletown in those.
could you go
So
back to that, just so we can understand what you're trying to show us? Which region, because, I mean, same thing as you, I'm looking at the programs, and we have one at Pecasset, Ranger, Fort Barton, middle school, high school, so I'm trying to figure out if we have all of these programs already in our buildings, what don't we have that we would need the additional space?
I don't think it's what we don't have. When I read the report and from talking to Rich, is we can't, if we need more, in other words, we're at capacity. We don't have any more room to expand any of our programs at any of our schools. That's my takeaway. I'll let Rich, he did this review. But from my that's what we know, and the
I mean,
report
'cause
tells
the
us
only
that.
one on there that I see that we don't have that's comparable is the middle school behavior support program 4 through 6. All the rest of them, we have a mirror program.
Right, but we wouldn't be able to, we wouldn't, if our population, the needs grew beyond where we are, we don't have the space.
So,
And in addition to-
so what, would we send them out of district
Yes,
now?
we would have to either, if Middletown didn't have room, which I don't want to speak to, Sarah can speak to it better than I, but for the whole region, we are maximizing most, if not all of our spaces. And all those programs, 5 years ago, we didn't have preschool at Middletown, or I don't want to say Middletown, but in Tiverton and Little Compton. Those programs didn't exist. We didn't have our alternate assessment program here at the high school.
But we
to the
do
degree
now.
what we do now, which is why we've saved money, because we have those programs. We can't expand it. We don't have anywhere to go, is my takeaway from reading the report.
But that holds true for regular ed students as well.
No, we have room for regular ed at the middle school and high school.
Not the elementary school.
Regular ed students at the middle school and high school, we have space. For regular ed kids, at the elementary, we don't. But for middle and high school, we do have space for regular ed kids.
But not special,
Yes, if we needed special programming, we're using all our classrooms.
In
Right
the
now.
elementary
So
schools.
one of the things too, although you said they mirror each other, the programs, they do mirror each other in the title, but there is some specialty to the programs as well. So just really quickly, although there's a behavior support program at a Quinnick and a Pecasset, the Pecasset school one right now is more a K1 level, where the Middletown one is more 2-3. So we do look at
So we have our 2-3 at
some
Middletown?
students may go to Middletown for that program. So we do look at that grade level span too. Another thing we look at for our alternate assessment classes is there are some specialties. There's a little bit of a difference of the children with type of disability that may go to the GOD-A program as different to the Tiverton program
And do
because
we
of the
have
range
other
of
districts-
disabilities.
Do we have other district kids in our program
Yes, you
as
do.
well?
Yes.
So,
net, net,
net,
It's specialty of services that are being provided by not only the teacher, but the teacher assistants, the school psychologist, social worker. If they need more sensory tools, there's space for a sensory area. So it is more about the service that's being provided based on the student's IEP. So if that student a Tiverton student going over to Middletown to receive that service, that's because he or she could not receive it in Tiverton. If Middletown wasn't there, they would be outsourced to an added district placement, which really they don't need, which is against the law. It's called least restrictive environment. Their IEP says they should be in the least restrictive environment, which is the public school for that IEP. So although swapping, they're getting that specialty service that they require per their IEP.
Could we, at a future meeting, I would like to see the numbers. How many numbers are Tiverton students here per program? How many numbers are out?
We will get to that tonight. I believe that's
Well,
one
we
of
don't
the
have to get to
slides.
it tonight.
No, but we
I'm
have
just
it in the
future, yeah.
presentation.
Oh, okay.
The vast majority of students are our kids. 99% of the kids that we service are Tiverton students. Where we save money, and Rich will get to it, is through shared costs. We're not paying for, and I don't want to, I'll
Yeah.
let Rich.
Yeah, why don't we let him continue?
Just as a note, we originally, in our first draft of our report, had a table which outlined the numbers of students in each district, in each school, from each sending district. We were required to remove those tables from the report because when you report numbers of fewer than 10, it's a student identifying information. So I would suggest to you, if you want the specific information with regard to the numbers of students in each of the programs, that you talk to Sarah privately, or maybe do so in executive session, as opposed to our being able to publish it.
Yep, that's perfect.
Got it.
Thank you.
Okay.
We did that one.
So anyways, the choices were either to develop in-house programs or outsource. When you look at having to develop a special ed department, these are the functions that would have to have been to do. Obviously, a special ed director, administrative support, secretarial staff, other staffing, age-appropriate school space. Our numbers, by the way, include the construction of 2 permanent modular classrooms to support bringing students back and creating 2 programs in-house. The caveat to that is that most of your schools don't have the footprint that would allow you to build on that site anyways. So space in this district is a real problem for expansion. But we did that at $450 a square foot, well, which is what the state is allowing for school construction. 900 square feet, self-contained classrooms, which means there's a bathroom in the classroom for special ed kids, and amortized over 20 years. And that worked out to about $27,750 per year per classroom in our numbers. So the addition of space is built into our cost differential, as well as the staffing. So again, the activities that would be required include program supplies, material, equipment, staff training and supervision in each of your schools, IEP development and management, accounting, reporting, the business function. You'd have to manage your own Medicaid reimbursement. You'd have specialized school transportation for within the district. Out of district, you rely on the statewide system. And the provision of appropriate school student support services. And you have to manage both the residential and out-of-district students that you already have, even though you'd be building 2 programs. So basically, you're replicating all the functions of what the regional program is doing on your behalf, both in-house and out-of-house. These are the savings. Little Compton is asterisk because their numbers were so small that developing their own programs was not economically feasible at all. So their only choice is to outsource their students. Tiverton, your alternate cost would be $795,000 more than you're currently spending for the regional program, which represents about 15.6%. Middletown was $660, or about 10.6%. And collectively, if the collaborative or the regional program were not here and you went to do it yourself, it would cost you collectively about $1.5 million more than you're currently spending with the region. The caveat to all of that is that over 5 years for Little Compton, that goes to $522,000, $500,000. For Tiverton, you're looking at almost $4 million over what you're currently spending over the next 5 years. These are not small numbers, and when you're looking at budgets and the support that you get now, it's significant money. And again, collectively, or Middletown was $3.3 million over 5 years, and collectively, it would cost the 3 districts a total of about $7 million over the 5 years. Now, the other alternative would be if you set up your own special ed department, which you would have to do, and you outsourced those students that are being provided services outside of your district by outsourcing them to private placement. Your cost difference would be $1.1 million, or almost 22% more than you're currently spending. Collectively, it's $1.9 million, almost $2 million, or 16.5% more than you're currently spending. And again, when you look at those numbers over 5 years, Little Compton becomes $500,000. As I said, their only choice is to outsource. Yours is about $5.5 million over 5 years. And Middletown, next slide.
Sorry.
Middletown would be 3.7 over 5 years, and collectively it would be almost $9 million over the 5 years. And so, as currently constituted, your regional program provides high-quality programs and services while being cost-effective. In the report, you'll see we made some recommendations with regard to considerations for either future programs or services that you might want to consider through the regional program. There's a whole laundry list of them. Probably the most prominent one and the highest priority is to develop more supports for students with behavioral programs. And that's not only here in the 3 districts. We found that to be true in a lot of districts that need, as the student body and the student culture is changing, that more behavioral supports are needed in the school, school-based supports. And that's basically it. The one thing that all of this does not include is those intangible things that come from collaboration, the things that you can't put a dollar sign on. The collegiality of the three districts, of the three superintendents, the opportunities to do regional brainstorming, to do regional problem solving, to look at developing economies of scale for things that you can't do efficiently yourselves, to look at shared services between your school districts and your town governments. There's a myriad of things that are possibilities, and at some point, if the boards are interested in expanding, there's an opportunity to start looking at prioritizing what your needs may be. So in essence, we found high-quality programs and the fact that they're cost-effective. Going into the study, one would think that if you had a well-operated regional program, that it would be less of a cost than districts replicating those, each district themselves, and replicating those programs and services 3 times. And when you look at the cost of the district doing it compared to the cost of outsourcing it, you would assume that the cost of replicating yourself would be cheaper than outsource, and that proved to be so here. So the lowest cost is the regional program. A little higher cost would be doing it yourself, and a higher cost yet would be outsourcing. And as I said, when you look at a well-operated regional program with economies of scale, that's what you would expect to see, and that's what we did see.
Just to go back to an issue regarding enrollment, on page 23 of the report, in the hard copy, there's a chart there. It's by district. It says total SPE, special ed students, Tiverton 300, Little Compton 32, Middletown 365. There's a second set of numbers there, it's a total of 19. That's the number of shared students between the 3 districts. Okay, we can't identify the number because you might be able to identify a child. But that's the total number out of 697, we share 19. Again, what I was saying before, a misnomer is that, and it's in every district. In Middletown, it's why are we educating Little Compton and Tiverton kids? Lots of times in Tiverton we hear why are we educating Middletown kids, so on and so forth. The numbers here don't show that. These are our kids in our programs, both in Middletown, both here, Middletown and Little Compton. The second number, or the third number, called total OD, that's out-of-district placements. That's the tuition students. Those are the students that are being tuitioned out of the district because we can't provide the service internally. Those are our out-of-district placements. We have 57. That number is, when this was done back in May and June.
And we're going to have those no matter what.
Right. This number is even a little higher now. I mean, from cost-wise, it's a little higher, but you can see the vast majority of the kids, the region services are our kids from a Tiverton standpoint here in Tiverton. And that's, I think, kind of the number, or addresses the areas where we were before.
The other number that's noteworthy is that the regional program manages all the programs and services for a total of 697 special ed students between the 3 districts. That's a significant number of students to be managed through one special ed department.
Bill, do you remember how many students we lost when Portsmouth went?
There's about
Sarah probably knows.
400. About 400.
From the region. When they left, they took 400.
Yeah,
We stopped
that
servicing
was my
400
question.
students.
Thanks.
Portsmouth had 400?
Yes.
Yeah.
They have a significantly larger student population.
I didn't realize they were that big.
Where Middletown and Tiverton are much closer, maybe 400 kids difference. Portsmouth at the time was running around 2,800 kids, I believe.
I see.
If I could just call your attention for a minute to page 29. The last sentence in the last paragraph should be deleted.
Yeah, that's why we're going to take that
Okay,
one
we will
out.
delete that tomorrow morning and resend the report.
There were no issues or concerns?
That was a statement that was a lead-in to another paragraph earlier in the report, that when we finished cutting and pasting, it didn't get deleted. So it should have been deleted. All those issues and concerns were covered in the body of the report.
Do we have any collaborations remaining with Portsmouth at all, or are they
No.
completely?
We do not,
We're
at this
completely dead to
point,
them?
no.
Okay. Any other questions, Ms.
I-
Farmer?
Yeah, I have a few.
Okay.
Question regarding the calculation for the sharing assessment. I noticed that it involves an average 3-year population of special ed students for the school-based programs and an average 3-year of all students for the admin costs. Can you tell me why that's different?
Did you want to do that, Rich, or?
No, if you want to, go ahead. But that's the assessment formula that had been developed by the superintendent, being your board. It's based on part of the services that are
Yeah.
provided is based on the 3-year average of your total special ed enrollment. The other part of the assessment, which is the regional programs, is based on the 3-year average of participation.
All right.
And so when you add the two together, the assessment comes up to the total revenue or the total budget necessary.
What you're looking at is the formula, which is very confusing to try to understand.
Oh, yeah.
And and I'll let Doug speak to it further, but I've been doing this for, I don't know, many years, decade and a half. We've looked at it at least a half a dozen times to find a different formula that's easier to understand, quote, more equitable. This seems to be the best way to handle it, and I'll just let Doug
I
explain
think
it
we had a
further.
couple of years ago, we had all the finance managers
We
get
have, but
together.
we've done it, and
And
we do
Doug,
that.
before you do that too, one of
Yeah.
the things that we look at the full population is that although we're saying this is special education staff, this staff services all students. So although school psychologists and social workers may come under special education, they are servicing students throughout all of the schools, whether a student has an IEP or not. So there are special educators may work with students who are in the response to intervention phases, and they are not students with IEPs, but a special educator could be providing some of those interventions. So it really is an all-kids agenda when we look at that formula, and I think those are some of the services from
And also
the total
And
population.
the co-taught, and another example is co-teaching. You have a special ed teacher in the classroom. They're not there just for the special needs students who have IEPs, but they're there for all the kids. So that's just another example of how all the students
I was just going to build
are
off of
being
that. The using the total population helps spread the costs a little more permanently, where you may have spikes year to year, and that's one of the reasons we use the 3-year average. So I think we wanted to avoid having a spike in one year and it continue, throughout the 3-year average by having the base of the total population.
What that does essentially, because I use the 3-year average in my previous employment, is that it takes the bumps out of the road budget-wise, as Doug said. The other is that you get to make the right educational decision for a child without worrying about the cost implication, because you don't see that cost implication in the fiscal year that it happens. You see it as it works its way into the 3-year average in succeeding years. And so you get to make the right educational decisions.
On both your slide and on page 14 of your report, the chart that describes I guess it's percent of student participating in park. It doesn't indicate that anywhere in the chart. I was going to ask, but he did make mention of it, but it really doesn't have it in the documentation at all.
Sure.
It just shows the numbers.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
if
we can
that
put
could
a
be
title
updated.
in there too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
And the one thing that came to mind when I was looking at, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, but it just occurred to me. You're showing students with IEPs who approached, met, or exceeded state standards. And you're looking at IEP students only.
Yes.
I'm trying to understand, and you're comparing district to district, which really is not necessarily a valid comparison, because our districts are different from one another. I was thinking perhaps that you could pair it up with how are the whole districts doing side by side to see the trend. How are our special needs students, are they improving at a similar rate to the regular students?
We would do that, we didn't do that this year because, we can do it, but since RIDE changed the assessments, we didn't really we
this
reported
one
out
didn't tell me
but
anything.
what it does show you is when you look at a subgroup of students with special needs, that our students, and again, we don't like to, we don't use it as how successful we are, but if you wanted to see a snapshot of, again, just neighboring districts, and these aren't, and a couple of them, Middletown and Bristol Warren, are districts that we have used in the past that meet our other requirements, our free reduced hot lunch, not necessarily population or location, but this was just to give the reader and readers, people who read the report, to say, well, where do they stand when you look at it compared to neighboring districts. It's not a drill down by any stretch. It's not meant to make, for us, for the reader, to make educational decisions. It's just informational to say where we stand. Tiverton, in both cases, we're well above the state. The number you should look at is the state average to see where the whole state is.
State averages aren't on here.
Yes, they are. They're in gray.
The far right.
On the
Okay,
far
you're
right.
You're right.
And we're well above the state average in both. And if that's the number, that's what we always look at when we look at our grades, where are we with the state? We don't look at other districts. We just go, okay, 11th graders, where were we? Or 5th graders, where were we with the state? We don't look at other districts.
If I may, to build upon that, I think the cohort issue Mr. Wyrick addresses, and the fact that we know that when we look at the same group of students over time, we can see growth. If it's the same metric, it's hard to do that because the test is changing yet again. And the PARC assessment is really such a high-level assessment. These stats talk about students with disabilities, students with educational disabilities, who are meeting or exceeding the standard. By definition, the subgroup of students who have IEPs have challenges in one or more areas. And so there's a whole nother conversation to be had about whether that's the metric to look at growth.
And I'm not looking to compare these students.
No, I understand.
At all.
What my point is just that when we really look at students' growth, we generally don't use that summative assessment for students whom we know have a challenge in an area. We look at more specific every 6 to 8 weeks or every quarter growth over time on a metric that measures where they started from and where they've grown to. And our district does do that. And we do that collaboratively with input from the region and their staff, particularly their specialists. But it is hard to show growth on that kind of a tool for this particular subgroup of students who, if you will, by definition, one might expect not to meet the standard in the area of their disability. Otherwise, they might not have an individual education plan, because if they were meeting the standard without the support, they wouldn't necessarily need it. So it gets into a whole
I gotta
deeper
tell you,
conversation.
I feel like even talking about PARC in this context is really going down the rabbit hole.
Agreed.
We're just
want to address the
again, we have it in there as a point of
It's stated-
information.
right, it's stated
For
that
our
we have.
district, we know where we stand on it. This is a new committee from the previous committees, but I don't think we've moved. We may disagree on other things, but we haven't disagreed on
I haven't stopped disagreeing.
not
with PARC.
overvaluing a test score to be the true measure of how a kid's going to
That is not
succeed.
at all my.
No, I know.
No, but the point, and that's what this is
My point
here
what is it
for.
doing in here? What
It's
is
the
it really
spider
telling
drawing
us?
us
Well,
into
what,
its web is
it's
what
to
PARC
show
is.
as a cohort, because you need this for when we go to battle for the budget. We need to be able to say where we are. We need to be able to say our kids with special needs and our regular ed kids are doing better than the state average. We may not we don't use that as a determining factor or base all our decision-making on it, but you need it to move forward. You need it as a tool to educate people to say, we're getting our money's worth out of the school district. And that's what, again, I looked at this and then I went to the recommendations, are we viable? In my opinion, this report shows and puts it to rest, I'm sure some won't like it, that it would cost, we can work with making us more effective, and we always do as a region, but to go it alone or to outsource it completely, and we've heard both. And Sally's been here the longest, she's heard it all, as well as I have. Deb has too. That we don't need why do we have to pay all this money? Why don't we just send them, quote, send them out? We don't, you know, it will be cheaper. Well, it won't be cheaper. That's what this report shows. It validates our program, and it also validates and gives, much like with the the building committee, when we did the study, we have an objective study to say what we're doing well. And people can disagree with it, but it's an objective study, and it's something that we're going to use from the regional standpoint to improve ourselves as an organization.
Yeah, I think I would like to dig into the numbers in the back a little bit more than I'm probably going to be able to tonight, based upon some of the conversation, because it is concerning to me that with 400 more students in the district, we didn't see any economies of scale, and that was the whole purpose of us all being together, is economies of scale. Yet Portsmouth left, and while I'm thrilled our costs didn't go up, it does give me pause that I just want to dig into the numbers a little bit more, and I'm not going to be able to do that tonight.
All right, so I think it'd be reasonable to digest this a little bit and maybe revisit it at a later meeting.
Could we also, in a future meeting, get a little bit more numbers as we compare Tiverton to Middletown? Because obviously we're the two largest players in all of this. Where are we with, comparatively speaking, students per teacher?
Regarding what, special ed?
Regarding special ed between the two districts. So
What-
are we equally being served by the region? Do we have comparable numbers in that regard?
Comparable number of teachers
Per
versus,
student,
yes,
students?
yes. We can get those numbers, but certainly yes. And that's driven by the IEPs.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then, what was the last one? Was this a mandated report or something you went to?
No, we
No, we
wanted to
decided
do
to
No,
it.
do
we
it.
wanted it.
We wanted
I
it.
was trying to remember that. And
Nope.
how much are we going to be sharing for the cost of this?
The cost was 35,000?
I believe so. And so we get a third of that.
A third?
Yeah, that's about our share. It's
Yeah,
about
all
30%.
three districts have wanted
Equally?
this for
Okay.
a while.
Yeah, this wasn't just, this was a regional decision. Board of Superintendents, I'm one of the votes. Superintendent
But it
Prager
came
is
to all
the
the
other.
school committees as well.
Yeah.
It did. Prior to coming here, we went to Middletown
I forget
and
when we
shared the
started
report
with
with them,
Amanda
and then
before
we
you were
came
on.
here. And I can get that actual number to you. I'm saying 35 from memory, but I could get that number to you too.
Okay.
If that's wrong.
Thank you.
I would suggest that as you have questions, after you have a chance to digest some of this,
Yep.
if you email the questions to Sarah, she can pool the questions and send them to us, and for those that she will answer. If those that we need to answer, we will answer.
Yeah.
And get back to you.
I guess what I would like to do, Mr. Eric, is maybe put this on the agenda for the second meeting in October again, just to kind of revisit it, and not necessarily to have everybody come here, but just kind of, maybe
October or
Sarah could
September?
come. October.
October.
Second meeting in September is in 2 weeks. 30-something pages. Yeah. Okay. Got a lot to do. Mrs. Black.
Yes, as Mr. Eric said, and Mrs. Polish knows, we've looked at this many times, but on the bottom line is that we all want to make sure that all our kids are getting the best services that they can possibly get. And when people on the Budget Committee or ever question me about the numbers, I say you're only a fever or an accident away from having a special needs child, and then you won't be able to thank us enough for the services that you'll be provided as a teacher of children with special needs. The IEP was the most wonderful thing that I read in there, because I know every word counts in that. You put the wrong word in that, you're in big trouble even with the federal government. So I'm really happy about that. And I just want to make sure that Tiverton Elementary, Middle, and High School are providing each kid what they need wherever they have to go. Hope we can keep them here. I just worked in Fall River today on the polls, and they were saying how we used to have Ruggles School in Fall River, where all the kids went there that had special needs. It was horrible. Then they went to Chapter 7, and they had the integration, the inclusion, and how much better it is so that those children can have role models. We've come such a long way. It's so exciting, and I never want to go backwards. So thank you to everyone that worked so hard on
And
this.
just one other
Thank
thing
you,
on the
Mrs.
numbers. Someone might ask, well, what's our percentage of students? It's 16%. Our student population with special needs is 16%. 5 years ago, it was 21%. So we've done a much better job through our ITI process, which still needs work. We continually work to improve it, but that's a percent of the total population. Regardless of the population, the percentage of kids identified is much, there are fewer. So that's another good data point to look at, that we have fewer kids, percentage-wise, that need services.
Can I just ask one more question, and I promise I'll let us all move on? Seeing here that Fort Barton has taken on the, I guess, K through 2 intensive class.
Yes.
Can you tell me what went into that decision to move it from Ranger?
Actually, we were looking at space for that reason. Was one of the reasons, the main reason why we moved it over to Fort Barton, and also just for the continuation. Secondly, the continuation of the students in that K1. If their IEPs remain the same, it would be consistent and then could stay at Fort Barton in grades 3 and 4.
Because they're already there.
And minimize the transition for them if we could.
We had a lot of parent concern as far as the student that started Ranger and then halfway through their
Had to move.
They had to move for a while.
That makes sense.
So a lot of that came from space as well as concern of students.
And we had it there before previously, and so it was moved and we had bubble class, and so our bubble class was now burst and is now at the middle school, so now we have the space that we class.
Can bring them back.
And we also believed, we were, as we recall, we were worried about enrollment, that we might have to open up another classroom at Ranger. So
that's right.
that was also part of the, when we say space, we were thinking that we might need it for a regular ed classroom, plus the academic reasons that we just talked about for moving it.
Thank you.
So it's about real estate.
To follow up on Diane's question, we're 42% of the region, so if the study was 35, it would have been about $15,000 expense, but it was budgeted at the regional level, so it'll come through our allocation.
You seem to remember 15.
Okay.
If I,
Anything?
No.
if I could, in summary, I'd like to acknowledge that both your administrative staff, certainly the regional staff, and your school-based staff took the time out of their day to see us and visit with us and provide us with, I'll say, quite candid information with regard to school operation. These were confidential interviews. They remain confidential, but we certainly thank them for their candor throughout this process. We interviewed 93 staff over the course of the team's visit here.
You just stirred another question, I'm sorry. Why were parents not interviewed as a part of this?
Part of the reason is that there was a separate parental questionnaire that had been recently done.
Yeah, they are included in the process. The state had just completed a survey of parents of students with special needs, and the questions that futures were going to ask were very similar, so they were able just to use that data from the state
Do we have that
rather than
data?
doing that on their
Will we
own.
see that data?
Sure, we can put that in.
Yeah, I that was actually my
Yep.
final question too. Was I think this is a very different kind of look at things, and I can understand why you might not have integrated some of that, but I do want to understand how we assess the
Parent satisfaction.
parent
Sure.
satisfaction and their views of
Yep.
things.
Yep.
So maybe we could do that at the second meeting in October.
We can include that piece.
Kind of have a chance to digest some of this information and revisit it, and then hear about the results from the parental
Sure.
survey. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very enlightening experience, as all experiences here are. So, item 8B, discussion possible vote on school committee recommendations to the town charter. So you have received in your packet correspondence from the Charter Review Commission, originally asking us to come to speak with them or meet with them on September 7th. That wasn't a possible date for us for a number of reasons, so I have rescheduled it for October 16th. What I would like to do tonight is open the floor to the committee about what things we would like to focus on, and then perhaps in the next two meetings, because we have two meetings before that October 16th date, to kind of refine what we feel the Charter Review Commission should try and address, both with regard to the sections of the charter that govern the school, which is a pretty brief part of the charter, frankly. And I think the biggest thing for us from the charter is probably the budget process. So with that,
I'll start.
Mrs. Palish?
Well, I think one of the things we found that we were all surprised about, and I would think Mr. Karen's going to address it, but just to make sure that he does, that our budget that we originally submit to the Budget Committee does not have to be the budget that we put on if we decide to put on an alternate budget. That needs to be extremely clear.
Yes, that was a finding on the part of the town solicitor
Right.
that even though he was told by people who rewrote the charter last time that that's not what the intention was. So I
Right.
agree, that is a crucial part. And just for sort of to gloss that for people, in the event that the school or the town's proposed budget to the budget committee is not put forward by the budget committee, each body has the option, without necessarily gathering signatures or certifying their ballot question, has the option of putting forward their budget independently. And let's just say that got us into quite a bit of a mess because of the capacity for the town solicitor to find things in the charter that are not there. So that does need to be clarified, I agree.
The other thing that I know that they noted that would be real very difficult is they actually want to move the when we submit the budget even earlier
So-
than we do now.
Yeah,
and
so-
that would be
I think that there are, sets of items for consideration. There are, I think what they are looking for from us is not commentary on what someone else might say, because
okay.
otherwise
So
we'd be
just
there.
what's in there.
So I
Just-
would actually recommend we go the opposite direction.
Me too.
Go later.
Make it later.
I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know why we have to have our preliminary budget in January 15th and our final in March, when perhaps we could take the preliminary
Well,
February 15th. I don't see what the.
The
harm
date
is.
we're working against is June 30th, as I
Understood.
understand it.
Yeah,
That
we're
we
not
have to
gonna-
have two, and I don't know what happens if we don't have it in, but sort of like,
I think that's the problem. And then when you back up to
we're not
have to
getting a
get,
grade on
That's what
it.
it is.
you have to note. Nancy has to notice it, and that's weeks.
True,
And
true,
I think
but
it's
there's 2 months between when the preliminary budget is due and the final budget.
And typically, we get our health insurance rates in that time period, so it does make a significant difference.
The state also pushed back when you can notify teachers to June 1st. That was done.
Yeah, that used
The
to be
one
an issue.
time that, at least this time, the General Assembly listened, which for most districts, that's a good thing, because most districts are doing their budget. June 30th is for every community in Rhode Island.
Yeah.
Every community, I'll just use the island, our neighbors, do their budgets in late May, early June.
Yeah.
So I don't know what June 30th has to do with anything. Maybe the town has unique noticing laws or something, but every other, the 3 communities on the island are making their decisions in May to late May, when school departments can, in other words, you would like to think, to go along with what Diane was saying, you would like to think that the folks in town would want the most accurate information that we can provide. Essentially, we stop the process in March, when we meet with them. And if that issue isn't clarified, I mean, the charter changes won't be voted on until later. So for this year's budget cycle, we have to assume that the budget number we submit by June 15th is the only number we can put forward.
January.
January
January.
15th, excuse me, January 15th.
Right. The way they.
Right, the way
interpret it.
they, because this won't be settled for another year. In other words, we got one more cycle that we have to get in. So just from an operational standpoint, we have to assume that it is going to be you can't change it for at least one more cycle.
So maybe we request like at least a month, like February 15th. And again, I know it's because we have other communities have a council. Basically, they just have a 48-hour notice and then they vote on their budget. We have the referendum, which has to have, you have to give time for people to put in an alternate budget. You have to have time for signatures. You have to have time to notice it.
Right, but if you
so
move
that
it-
tacks on extra time, but I'm not sure why we couldn't at least have an extra month.
It's become problematic because we're trying to forecast,
I
for
agree.
example,
18 months.
out of district sped costs,
We don't
halfway
even know
through the
them.
year. So any bump along the way, or it gives the communities an extra 5 months to project that and refine their projections.
So we could at least recommend that they move it as late as possible, given all of that.
Even a month or two can make a significant difference.
Exactly.
Even, as Diane said, to the 15th
So
of
those are kinda
February
my two things.
would be,
It'll be another
Better than
month.
what it is.
would be helpful, because we come right out of Christmas. I mean, not that anyone wants to hear our tale of woe, but the way the process is, we come right off of Christmas vacation. We have a special meeting the first Tuesday in January, and we have 2 meetings to put a preliminary budget. I mean, we don't have a lot to move around. I mean, we're not like the town side, I guess, because our numbers are pretty, I guess, stable, consistent. But we just don't have all the, pieces that early.
Yeah,
It'd be
so,
helpful
yeah,
if we could put it off.
We can ask that they investigate pushing it back as late as possible.
All right.
Those are my 2 things.
I also wonder what the value is of having the combined Budget Committee, Town Council, and School Committee workshop in January.
Tradition. I don't know if
No,
that
no,
has
no, that's
value.
state law.
But that's a state law. There is a state law. Now, granted,
Yeah.
Agreed.
and again, in the past, there have been productive meetings. We would, a few years ago, we told the Budget Committee that we'd be going for the facility study.
Yeah.
And, to kind of, and that we were going to go to vote for the bond. I mean, outside of that, from our standpoint, outside of meeting the state requirement, there's not a whole,
Yeah, but it's.
not a whole lot of
That
value.
one's state law, but the one that makes no sense is the make-believe public hearing at the end, because
Well, that's
everything's
true.
already set by then, you can't change anything.
Yes, right, you have the
That's-
hearing. Because again, that was, in the
No.
old days, you used to be able to change things
No.
on the floor. But,
No.
yeah, right, why do you have that first meeting in May?
And then
'Cause
the other
nothing can
thing, the other
change.
thing I'm...
So do you want to recommend that they get rid of it?
No, I'm just,
Oh.
no, they like to have that. The other thing
Makes them feel good.
the other thing I want to mention is that when I was at the meeting, Mr. Karen said that since no town council or school committee has ever put something in, he thinks of taking that out. I said, we tried to put something in, it just didn't work out this year, so I hope that they leave that in there. I don't want them. And 1218, of course, is a big concern of ours, the language of it. I know we keep part of it in, but the word labor, you remember? You can't use your labor, which means
So
none of us
maybe
could
we
work at the polls.
We could suggest some
Just to look
language
at a
change.
review of the language change, not to take the whole thing out, but just look at a language change. Because I can take the duct tape off my mouth then after that, okay? That'll be good.
I also-
Unconstitutional, right, Mr. Robinson?
I'm surprised they haven't been sued over it.
Unconstitutional.
Want to say that for them?
I did notice a couple of things within the 2 paragraphs that speak to the school committee that
Yeah.
perhaps we could clean up. One, it has to do with vacancies. It speaks to vacancy being for a period of not to exceed either 6 months or until the next election, whichever is sooner.
Yep.
Clearly, that hasn't been followed. So
Nope.
I would recommend that it just read to a period until the next election.
Right.
That makes more
Alright.
sense and is more in keeping with what's happening. And then there's also mention of the copies of minutes being on file with the office of the town clerk. Is that the case?
We put them on file with the Secretary of State
Right,
per
so that-
statute.
That should be
There's
adjusted
no
in the
reason
language too.
We used to, but we don't,
We don't do it.
no.
But don't they have to, don't they go
They
to
go to the
secretary?
state.
Yeah, they go to the
They
state.
They
do,
go to
but
the
this is saying
state.
town clerk.
Yeah. So,
I mean,
It's
yeah,
just an
yeah,
update?
so
it can
clean
be
that
a,
up too, yeah.
um, you might want to put that forward as a private citizen, because I think the things that I would probably recommend, what I would recommend that we focus on as a committee are the things that we feel are most likely to move the district forward. Whether or not we get any traction is another story, but.
I mean, but as members of the school committee,
Right.
I think
should focus on
one of the biggest
school
changes or
specific stuff, too.
things to consider is that time change to submit the budget.
Yeah.
I think that's an important piece, and what Diane brought up is a good point. We don't send our minutes to,
I mean, we're looking
Yeah,
at
but
it, we
years
might as
ago.
well clean it up.
long time ago,
Yes.
but we
But then
don't.
when the state started.
Right, that's,
requiring
I mean,
and
we might
nobody's
as well
at,
clean it up.
let's put it this way, the town hasn't asked for them either.
No, we
Yeah.
don't have room for them
We
either.
just tell them to go to the Secretary of State. I have wondered about taking on the whole idea of the petitioner's budget and the budget process and the town referendum in general, and I think it's worthwhile suggesting to them, maybe we shouldn't have a financial town referendum at all, that actually it should be the budget committee that, one of the things actually that I think is clear in a pretty murky situation is that voter turnout tells us that people really don't want to vote on this. They don't show up. And so in a sense, you could sort of say that the system is rigged towards low turnout, and that they could either try and link it to the general elections, or they could say, well, you vote when you vote for your budget committee, and the budget committee, determines what the budget is. There's probably some risk to that, but I think we have to recognize that we don't live in an Athenian democracy. We live in a sort of a republic where people want government to take some responsibility and decide things for them, so that they don't have to constantly be deciding things. Toward that end, I wonder, what would it be like to do a 2-year budget as opposed to a 1-year budget, and then you have the budget approved in November?
You have, as you know, first, we could do 2 years for some things, like salaries you can project, but you can't project your retirement costs. You can't predict your health
insurance would be a
insurance.
And the
those are-
quality of the projections on some of the sped costs wouldn't be as great in that second year.
I gotta think there's tons of state laws that
there's all
just
kinds of
discuss
statutory
annual
stuff.
budgets.
I think the question, that
Yep.
to narrow it for the committee, is form of governance for the town. That's the question. In other
Right.
words, do you keep the FTR, or some other alternative that somebody a governing body, not somebody, a governing body has the authority
Right.
that when they vote, that's the budget.
Right.
That, I think that's kind of the question that.
and I think in
Yeah.
the current structure, assuming that that'll be that commission's recommendation, that we stay with the FTR, I'd love to see us consider the size of the budget committee in that event. I wonder what the effectiveness
Is
of
it
having
smaller
an
or bigger?
11-person committee really is. I think that feeds into the length of their meetings and the amount of time it takes to go through all these budget items, because there are so many of them, and they go around the table. I mean, I've watched quite a few of them this year, one at a time. Everyone had their say, and back the other way. I mean, I'll give Chairman Leonard a lot of credit for managing that, but with 11 people, to me, it was a little bit much. That perhaps they could, if we were to stay with an FTR format, then perhaps bring it down to either 7 or 5.
Okay.
Again, why have a budget committee? That's another part of governance.
Well, that's
Why
what I was
have a
getting at,
budget committee at all, when it can be currently overturned with the 50 votes and the signatures and then the vote? So again, it's a governance question. Why
Right.
not even the number, why have it at all is something.
I mean, there's no reason why you couldn't have the town submit its budget,
right.
school committee submits its budget,
That's it.
and a petitioner can submit whatever they want. And you're right, that's that.
a governing body, that authority.
Right.
That's an alternative.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think that also is what dissuades people from, running for that. The budget committee is, they really, they do all this work and then they get overturned. I guess the other thing I had about the budget was, again, maybe fighting the last war. They need to make more explicit exactly what process the petitioner is to go through and how it can be challenged. And frankly, you know, some requirement that if it is challengeable, that, you know, the town solicitor and the board of canvassers have to review it anyway. So why not make them review it and say, look, it's not what, you know, I am going to decide is proper this time. So do it this way, and then at least
Just say it.
Huh?
Just tell the people.
Yeah, instead of 15 minutes before
Make it
before the
more
vote.
clear what you need
Yeah.
to
But
submit.
you also need, again, language that, again, when they do the count back from the FTR, or from the vote, last past year, it was a Sunday or a Saturday?
It's a Saturday. It's a Saturday
That
in May.
has to be addressed.
Yeah.
Why would you have a day to turn in a petition on a day where the town hall's not open?
Yes.
What if it's a Sunday?
Right.
Unless, how does the average citizen know, oh, what do you do on a Sunday?
Right, it needs to say
It
something
needs to be
like
clear.
the Saturday
Right.
by noon
Right. Well,
following whatever.
But that's all part of the, if you are going to have the FTR, you have to, some of that language.
It's always going to be the
needs
case
to-
with the way it's written now, because it's the third Saturday in May for the vote, and the elector budgets are due 28 days prior. 4 weeks. So it'd be 4 Saturdays before that. That's how it's written today, so they would have.
And I got to imagine they're going to address, trying to clarify some of that language, so if we have any suggestions, we might as well.
But then if you're going to do 28, then don't pick a Saturday. Pick a day when the town hall's open for 8 hours. You don't pick a day when it's, or say in the change, well, you have until 1 o'clock on that Saturday.
Whatever the day
Whatever, you have to specify it to the average person
delivered.
who's not, politically attuned in, but wants to put a budget in.
Agree.
So how do we want to?
So I'm just furiously writing down things that we were, so what I have is the school committee budget option, the calendar of the budget, the petitioner's budget process, as well as the calendar associated with that, and the solicitor's review, and the board of canvassers, clause 1218, the vacancies clause, the governance and power of the budget committee, and the existence of the referendum at all, and then the minutes to the town clerk. So if we divided those up, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So there's 7 items there. We could each kind of try and fill out one of these forms and then review them at our next meeting for the final, or 3 of them, and then 4 of them, or anything else we come up with at the next meeting. We could then review them and submit them for the 16th. Does that sound like a plan?
Sure.
So the school committee budget option, who wants to take that? Jerry Larkin, would you like to take that? I
What's
will
that
take
mean, the school committee
So-
budget option?
At least you
Where
have
it
somebody to
says-
do
The
it.
alternate budget, I'll take
Yeah,
I'll take the alternate budget and the timing.
where the school, not a petitioner's budget.
No,
but
I know
the-
which one
the
you're talking
budget that
about.
the school
Yes.
committee can submit. All right. Calendar.
I'll take the calendar.
Okay, I'm putting your name down.
I'll try to flush out Miss Epke, who originally said it, and see if there was reasoning behind
The
it.
petitioner's budget process, the calendar, and the need for a review prior to it being voided.
Absolutely.
I'll take that. I sort of have a little experience with it. 1218,
I'll take that.
I'll take that.
Sally.
I've got 12.
Vacancies clause, that has Mrs.
Like
And the
Barr.
minutes, those are kind of together.
That's why you had the
And
ribbon.
Those would be
governance.
Diane.
So then,
So governance, power of budget committee, and the existence of the referendum.
That one's harder.
Mrs. Pavo?
Yes.
Okay. You're so calm. Would be good for that.
Ask about that.
That's the thing that'll probably drive him the craziest. And the minutes to the town clerk, Mrs. Barnworth? Okay, and then if anything else you want to bring up, kind of
I
write up
just,
a sheet.
I just have a question. It's not about that per se. And I know, and I understand that these are the committee's submissions, but what's the committee's, or are you going to talk about it at a later date, how to respond to the recommendations that impact us?
Yes, we do.
In other words, the Black Amendment,
That's,
the
yeah.
limiting school
So
committee
I-
members, the RERIC rule, superintendents can
black
only
rule.
serve so long, and all the other,
That's not the purpose of this
No.
particular meeting.
no,
Yeah.
but I'm saying that
I-
it's,
Oh, that's a different thing, yeah.
but that's
responding
something
to
that
them. Yeah.
you need
Yeah.
to discuss.
So Mrs. Black is our liaison to that commission, and I guess I'm waiting for them to really decide what they're gonna focus
Yeah.
on.
Yeah,
And
and then we'll know.
once that
Yeah.
is it, we address those things. There's so many,
There's so many
there were
now.
so many ideas in that document that, really just violate statute. It's kind of hard to understand what. No, no. And I guess they could introduce all of them, and that'll be a lot of fun.
I think we have to give them the opportunity to discuss
Focus.
it as a committee.
Yeah, they need to focus
Yeah.
it.
Make
They
a
might
decision if
decide
they're
to.
gonna back it or not.
Yeah.
Because that was one person's ideas.
Right, and then we'll submit them to you, so like last time, remember? Then we'll submit them to Mr. Robinson when
Yeah.
down.
Dr. Larkin, as I noted, I need to.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mrs. Palish.
Thanks.
Bye.
Um,
So Mrs. Palish has to leave.
Everything you said
Okay,
was
any
true,
other
by the
discussion
way.
on that topic?
Last time.
Okay, so we're gonna move to item 8.
Is that yours? That's yours.
No, I was asking about paper.
Oh, okay. Item 8C, superintendent search.
That's me.
Mrs. Pavo?
I asked for this to be placed on the agenda because we haven't begun to discuss the
Right.
schedule of when we might start a search, and it's such a lengthy process, we don't know
Right.
how long it would take. So my question is, could we begin a draft of a schedule, of a timeline?
Yeah,
And I started something over the last month, something very brief, and I was going to email it to the committee, and maybe we could pool our ideas,
okay.
if that was okay, or
Don't think we
how
can
would you
do
like
that
to
by
handle it?
email, yeah.
Okay,
So, I think you can create a document and send it to us. We can't have
Okay.
any discussion of it.
no discussion,
Yeah.
no discussion.
So why don't you create a document and send it to us, and we could take it up at the next meeting.
Right, okay.
Hopefully it's not getting too crowded there yet. It is?
We
Really?
keep saying we're going to put something to the next meeting, no, I mean, items, yeah. I know.
Yeah.
And we keep adding things.
I know. Well, that's at the next, or the meeting after that.
So that,
Possibly the next, the 26th, talking the 26th.
Yeah.
Wednesday next week.
Yeah,
We'll try.
okay,
and then if not, maybe we can go to October, yeah,
okay. All right.
which would be the 10th.
And then if anybody else has other ideas, we can bring those up
Yes.
at that point
Yeah.
too. Okay,
Okay, thank you.
sounds good. Any other discussion? Mrs. Black, Mrs. Farmer? All right. Moving right along, item 8D, status update on Cyber Patriot after-school program at the middle school and high school. Mr. Eric?
Mrs. Black asked for it to be placed on the,
Oh.
defer to
Mrs.
Sally.
Black, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, you're on.
Yes, you're on. When it,
No,
when it,
no,
no, you just turned it off.
Okay.
Now try it.
Okay, so,
There you go.
I asked for this to be on the agenda last time, along with Project Lead the Way, which I know that's crowded next time, but we have to get that done. It's time sensitive, the Project Lead the Way. So, we all know we had amazing Cyber Patriot teams at the middle school. We had 5 teams, and 3 of them were girls. And we won big trophies, and the kids came with the trophies. This was 2 years ago. And then we all discussed on how amazing it was, and let's have it at the high school, because we know these are the warriors of the future. This is an amazing program. And it was, Linda Larson helped get the sponsors, and we had the computers from different people, and the power plant. Everybody came in and helped us. And people are willing to help us if we're willing to do our job on this side. So I wanted to make sure that we checked why, are we going to have it? How are we going to have it? And that's why I asked it for it to be on the agenda. Thank you.
Okay.
Alls I can say is that it's an unbudgeted item. It's not in our budget for this year.
So did we have any, I don't recall off the top of my head, but was there money allocated from the school committee last year for it?
No.
So
With spots.
there was grant money that was,
No, not through us. We checked our grants. I asked our office 2 days ago. We didn't pay for anything.
okay.
And I also, just some background, because Sally asked for it to be on the agenda, I had posted for a volunteer for the middle school program about a week or so ago, when the union contacted me and said, please don't post it until we've had a chance to discuss with them concerns they had, because it's not in the budget. And I got a meeting with them on Friday. So I said, fine, I'll take it down until I meet with you. I don't know what their concerns are, but they just said they had concerns.
So you posted
For the middle school.
for the middle
because it was
school for
as a volunteer.
to do the
Yes.
Cyber Patriot program,
And that, they asked me to
and then
withdraw it.
had the union had any involvement in the program?
I don't recall they had an
this
issue with it
date?
last year. No.
Okay.
And again, I'm meeting with them Friday, so hopefully we can just clarify whatever questions, answer whatever questions they may have.
Okay.
If it's a volunteer, why would the
I don't know.
union
I
have a question?
asked that
To
question.
be
and
determined at the meeting on Friday, I guess.
talked to Amy today, just to be clear that I got the message correctly, and she said I did, and that we talked Friday.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Zara?
Jay Zaro from the middle school. What I did was give you guys two handouts that I put together. One is kind of a rough estimate of the costs it would take to run it at the middle school and the high school for the upcoming year, based off of what the costs were from this previous year and the year before. And then you have a handout that gives you some background information on Cyber Patriot, the program itself. The other attachment that it says the Gmail at the top is kind of giving you a timeline on how fast this is coming up. And we'll also give you a further timeline for the rest of the season. I was asked 2 years ago to set the program up at the middle school. And I was surprised the first year we had a pretty good turnout of kids. 30, we were maxed out, and we had a lot of kids that were interested in it, and that followed up the second year. Right now, my time commitments after school, I've been able to move yearbook over to another group of teachers. The startup with the Project Lead the Way program and bringing in the second class, the time is pretty extensive right now to try to do that, particularly with the one-man operation. But I also had a family situation with the grandkids doubling from 2 to 4. So now I'm kind of on grandpa backup babysitting duty. And I kind of looked at both yearbook and Cyber Patriot, kind of like if, say, Mr. Murray were to retire from the football, you wouldn't close the football program down. You would find some way to move it forward. And that's essentially what I'm here tonight, is asking the school committee to take some consideration into trying to put some structure into this and move this forward so whoever takes it over, it doesn't fall apart. It looks like the yearbook is going to be able to move forward with about 4 or 5 teachers that are going to kind of take it over. This is a little bit different because of the tech involved in it. The best example would be, say, mock trial, where you have Christine Costa, but you have Attorney Soa coming in to provide his legal expertise. You really need now to have somebody step in as either a mentor to help out one of the coaches. And the kicker is also at the high school level, because if you have the high school team activated, you then have the feeder system for the middle school kids to come up. But you also have scholarships and internships that are part of that program if the kids participate for 2 years at the high school level. So even though I understand it's not budgeted, and as Mr. Eric said, I'm not quite sure what the union issue is on that, but it's possible we could go to, say, outside private sponsorship, maybe a company,
We don't know
maybe
about
a couple of internal Tiverton residents that, have some expertise that might want to sponsor some of the teams at both the high school and the middle school level. Just some way we can kind of keep this structure together
because it's just about at the point now where it could take off. If you look at some of those handouts and the stats, I think they started with 9 teams in 2009 nationwide. They were over 4,000 this past year, and they're anticipating 5,000 teams. When we went to the banquet the very first year, we were probably in a room this size at the Crown Plaza. We went back the next year, and they had to get a room 3 times as big because the amount of schools just in Rhode Island had skyrocketed. The enthusiasm from the kids is not the issue, it's there. You have some high school students here tonight that participated back in 8th grade, and never having the 11th, the juniors and seniors had a shot at this at the middle school. I ran the numbers out based on what we did because I don't know what support you'd get from the juniors and seniors. I'm sure quite a few of them would want to participate in it since they've never had a shot at it. If you'd like to hear from a few of the students there, they could kind of, talk about it a little bit. I know Mrs. Mitchell and I have tried to come up with some type of way to move it forward. And I also know Mrs. Larson knows the ins and outs of it better at the high school, college internship side. But I'd be willing to answer any questions that you have or open the floor up to them.
So before we go there, so right now there is no advisor, and
Correct.
I'm sort of looking at the breakdown of costs. So it was about, the high end you say is about $1,600. Where was that money that money was spent last year?
Correct.
And where did that money come from?
Fundraising, that's some people picking up some of the costs of those registrations on those teams.
Donations,
Okay.
staff donations, husband and principal donations. things like that.
Can I just point out that
Yep.
this is the first I'm seeing of this?
Okay.
So I would ask that you allow me to review it first
Yep.
and take a look at it and digest it. But again, like we just had the conversation with soccer, the committee, as you know, just voted earlier that it was self-sustaining.
Right.
1 year only. We didn't budget this
Right.
at all. So again, if I go through it and say, yes, it has merit, I would bring it back to you with a recommendation to see if we could find the funds for it, or say it's up to the committee, whatever. I just need to look at it. I haven't
Right.
seen it yet.
Got it.
It hasn't come to me, so I just ask that I get an opportunity to digest it.
Okay.
And except for the cover sheet, which I just kind of generated those numbers off of what the costs are from their website
Yep.
and what we did, and the 2 bus trips that we did. One was to the awards dinner at Crown Plaza, and one was to CCRI Newport, where we had an opportunity to visit their cybersecurity training room. And they went into greater depth about the possibility for the kids with jobs and internships and scholarships in that Newport area.
If this cost was covered last year, I do have one question. What's changed from last year to this year?
What's changed is my time commitment.
No, the money. With this fund, in other words, there was a cost associated with this program. It was covered last year through a variety of means, is from what I heard. Those means aren't there anymore?
Well, my concern is if you have to reach out to someone like Attorney So or someone like that who wants to come in to help out, I'm just trying to leave a structure in place for somebody else to take it to the next level. Obviously, if you run it at the high school, you're going to have a little bit more expertise that you're going to need over here.
Right.
You could possibly have someone from the tech department act as a mentor, but I don't want to commit someone to something without them taking a look at it. I'm just trying to provide a structure for you right now to move it forward.
Yeah, I'd like to have taken a look at it first, too.
Well,
I appreciate that.
Okay.
Sentiment.
All right.
Yep.
So, Dr. Dias-Mitchell, can you gloss us a little bit? Can you kind of give us a little bit more background as well from your perspective?
You know, when we add high-tech, hands-on, exciting programs into, like the virtual soccer as well, there is no shortage of students, staff, and family engagement, but there's always a shortage of funds.
Mm-hmm.
As all the other principals do, at the end of the year, we central administration, and we all have our asks, and I always,
All right.
So anything new is generally, when we get the dollar more, generally chopping block.
Mm-hmm.
So, Jay, when this came across my desk a few years ago, it was actually Superintendent Rarick who sent forward to the commissioners, weekly memo. And I saw it there, and I forwarded it to Jay, I said, this is great, let's look into this. I had no idea that there was a prior program at the high school that sort of waned, waxy waned a bit and kind of fell by the wayside. And we realized that there were pieces of equipment there that we could bring in, and they were donated to us. And under his volunteerism, our time and energy committed to this amazing program that could result in full scholarships within the state for kids who go to the cybersecurity pathway. So Jay would solicit donations and sponsorships and combine yearbook and cyber pages for some chocolate.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
And that's how we floated it.
Okay. So it seems to me that the first thing you really, if the program is to be sustained, would be to identify a new, advisor and sort of godfather to it all.
Right.
What I would encourage, I guess, all three of you to do is sort of see if there is such a person to be identified. I'm not clear, well, as Mr.
I'm not
Burke,
clear either,
what-
and that's why,
So that's an important piece.
yes, I
What-
gotta.
what the issue is with,
Again, I
okay.
even said, I said, we did it last year.
Yeah. All
And
right.
I don't want to get into the conversation, but.
Yeah, so we need to-
I had the
yeah.
same
Right.
We need to
uncertainty.
find out what that is, and whether or not it has merit or needs to be accounted for in some fashion. Give Mr. Rarick a chance to look at these dollar amounts, and perhaps we can revisit it at the next meeting. Is that an echo?
And
At some
just
point.
One thing I just want to point out, I'm not here asking for a stipend, I'm
Right.
not here asking for a retroactive.
No, I understand that.
But what I'm saying
no
is,
effort.
there's a difference between, say, yearbook and this program, and say, cross-country and basketball. With cross-country, you're able to take on as many that want to do the program, just like yearbook was. But the way this competition is set up, we're only allowed 30 students max.
Right.
And I think that's what a lot of the students at the middle school level were hoping was going to then happen at the high school, that they could continue with it.
Yeah.
And that's the structure I'm just trying to do, is I kind of help someone take this over, move it forward, whether
Right.
it's private, budget, grant money,
Right.
something along that line. But I just wanted to bring it to your attention because the timeline is moving forward.
Okay. Thank you.
Equipment-wise, we have the equipment.
And the program, as I recall, starts in the winter sometime?
No, it actually starts, they actually added an earlier practice round because with the middle schools, they really need a little bit more time on this, so they worked an additional round in for the kids, which opens this Friday, but it runs until like mid-October. So it gives those schools that are still trying to get everything set up a little bit more time. You need to have all of your teams and your coach and everything registered by the 4th. You don't necessarily have to pay for it by October 4th, but they need to be registered in their database website. So we have a little window here, to try
Just,
to put something together.
From a planning standpoint, this is being done backwards. From a planning standpoint, this is something that should have been brought to us during the budget cycle and/or in the spring or in the summer, so that we had time to digest and make recommendations to the committee. Now we're being held, it sounds to me like there's a timeline that we're now held to before we've had a chance to vet everything and put our ducks in a row and make a sound recommendation to the committee. Again, I'll take a look at it.
Okay.
Dr. Larkin, could we hear the students since they sat here all night? Could we hear?
Yes. Ms. Farnsworth, anything?
Not at the moment. I guess, are you advocating that we not only continue the middle school, that we go with the high school? Is this going to involve additional costs as
Well-
well?
Well, it would if.
I believe the original plan started at the high school. I just don't think
No,
that
there's no,
rocket got
to answer your
launched.
question, there is no plan. We don't have a plan for this.
Right.
That's part of the issue. We don't have a plan in place right now. So, and the answer would be yes. Just based on the front cover sheet, yeah, because we'd have to pay for high school teams, just on the surface. So the answer is yes, there would be an increase in cost, because we don't have a team, and we'd have to
So,
pay for
yes,
those things.
if there were no mechanism of
Right.
funding the way it was funded last year.
And would it also require equipment purchases?
No, we have the equipment for the middle school, and Megan Martinez from the state police donated an additional 6 computers last year that the tech department received in anticipation of having them if we needed to expand or move it up to the high school. The laptops we're currently using came from Tiverton Power, came from the high school program that never really launched. Then we took the laptops and we got the program up and running, and this would be the start of the 3rd year in the program.
Okay. Mrs. Black, anything else? We will let the students and.
No, that's all. I
Any other-
just want that.
Mrs.
No, I
Peba?
was wondering about. I was wondering about time, but time is of the essence, because.
Right, I mean, it's doable. I mean, if we get a contribution and we find somebody with some tech expertise, I can help them walk through the registrations and stuff. It's just that I can't commit
Right.
totally like I've done previous
And-
2 years.
And no one has come up to volunteer. You said did you post this and no one responded, but
No,
then.
the union
No, he has
Then
disallowed
the,
it.
then the union.
While it was posted, nobody did.
Yeah, and there probably won't be someone that wants to volunteer,
Why?
because it's,
We don't know. We don't
you
know.
know, we don't know, but it's
Right,
it's a
we don't.
big
So why would
undertaking,
we
it's a
even
big
want to say
undertaking.
that?
Yeah. All right.
Maybe they will.
So if a couple of the
That would be
students wanted to come up and talk, it's getting a little bit late, but, sure.
Hi, I'm Morgan Souza. I'm Abby Forcier.
I'm Cole Cirillo.
And the Cyber Patriot program had started up when I was in 8th grade, and so was Abigail. And I personally benefited from it. Yeah, we benefited from it a lot. Before this program was started, I had not known anything about STEM programs or anything. The computer program we took for the 4 years at the middle school was typing and Microsoft Office and stuff like that. So we had never gone into depth about coding or anything along the lines of what this has. So I really benefited from it I got to see this whole new perspective into like the IT world. And I realized that I had really liked it, and it was unfortunate that it was my 8th grade year, and I knew there wasn't going to be a program up here. We were trying to get one up here. So I benefited from it, but not as much as I could have as if it was still up here. Yeah, and I also really did enjoy the Cyber Patriot program and what it had. And it also did open up my eyes to possible career paths in the future and possibilities in IT or STEM. And it just gave me more options for the future and for my life.
I participated at 1 year when I was in 8th grade as well. And it was fun the whole way through. And when I figured out that I can actually get internships in Raytheon or Newark or other defense industries like that, I just wanted to do it more. And the possibility of getting a full paid scholarship to college in Rhode Island is great. I hope that it can be in the high school for that to happen.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Is your homework done? Okay. All right, so item 8E, request to approve reading recovery grant for Ranger School.
I'm asking the school committee to approve the request to go out for a reading recovery grant.
Okay, have a motion in favor?
Yes.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Thank you very much
Thanks,
for
Jenny.
paying for that.
Thank you, Mrs.
Thank you.
Denny. All right,
Mrs.
Ms. Ginny?
Long night.
It is a long night. It's getting longer. We haven't gotten to number 9 yet. All right. It's true, but we could go by the town council, see what they're doing. All right. Item 8F, homeschool requests.
Asking that you request, approve the homeschooling requests from the middle school. There are 5.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Second to approve.
And all those in favor? Okay.
Before you go into exec, because we've been here a while, I would it's up to the committee, but I think 10B we might want to put off.
Yes.
Negotiations.
I'll entertain a motion to table item 10B.
I'll make.
Entertain a motion to, you're going to make that motion?
I will make the motion.
Thank you.
that we table 10B.
Who wants a second? All those in favor? Thank you. Announcements?
None.
Dr. Larkin, could you tell about last night?
Yes, so last night, Mrs. Black and I went before the town council to request that our permitting and plan review fees be waived for the renovation project at the middle and high school, and I'm pleased to report that the council was very favorably disposed towards doing that for us, and they voted 7-0 to do that.
Excellent.
And
Thank you
Tiger
very
was
much
there
to them.
also. Tiger came with us.
Tiger was there, yes.
Thank you.
And I must express my appreciation to Mrs. Black, Mrs. Pavo, Mrs. Farnworth for being there, as well as Mrs. Zimick, Ms. Levesque, Mr. Odell, and Mr. Perry supporting us as well. So thank you very much, guys, for being there.
And
Okay.
Dr. Larkin, did you
Yep.
decide if I'm going to get a little trophy for being the liaison to the town council all these years till midnight?
Your trophy is going to be very large,
No,
not
just
little.
a little one.
And
It's a gold cat that goes like this.
I kept
We have the
looking.
gift. We have the gift for her. She's all set.
It can't be over $25.
I don't think it is, trust me.
Don't worry about it.
It's
Going
not.
to- You're going to get a trophy, and don't be surprised if there's a kid kicking a soccer ball at the top of it. All right. So I will entertain a motion to,
I actually had a brief announcement.
Oh,
I'm
sorry.
Believe it or not, it's been 4 years since, 3 years since we went out to extend our electricity contract. So I've been monitoring the rates, and they're about 20% lower than our current rate right now. So I'm thinking of locking in. So we don't need to go out to bid for this because we're piggybacked on the Association of School Committees contract. So if the committee doesn't have an issue with me monitoring and locking in, I was hoping to do that in the next week or so because they have started inching up for the winter season.
And Mrs. Wardell has an announcement. Excuse me.
And the rates are about 20%
Sorry.
lower than we currently are, so
Okay.
it's pretty advantageous.
all right, as an announcement, we cannot vote on that, but you're just
there
telling
anything
us.
There's no
That is an informational, we'll let you know.
I don't wanna step on it. Is there
I'm sure the
anything
committee
else?
members will let you know if they're not happy with that. Ms. Wardell?
Next Saturday, will be a special water flyer honoring the veterans educators. And one of those educators will be our assistant teacher for the year.
Yep. Very good. Yeah.
So we'd like to welcome everyone to come to the water flyer and help us honor. Be there.
All right, thank you. I cannot be there,
I've never seen the outdoor watching it. I've made it not. You go camping.
correct.
That's what you are. You should go. Expand your horizons.
Nah. They're limited. Because
sorry, I didn't get that part.
Chris is asking for the policy subcommittee.
So we
to-
have
We have a
a
second
scheduled meeting
Yes.
in 2 weeks. Please join us.
Yes, Chris asked for the policy subcommittee to take under advisement creating an early graduation policy, because we have a second student has been approved for this year. We had one last year. We went through all our policies. We don't have
No, we don't.
I see.
specific policy for that, so
So,
Okay.
Ms. Farnworth, you'll,
we'll do that. And
Sort of
we had,
address that.
we have an old one, but it was never approved, so.
Yeah, that's good.
got it.
We'll take care of that on the 26th.
Okay. Any other announcements? All right.
Going once, twice.
I will entertain a motion to enter executive session under Rhode Island General Law 4246582, session pertaining to nope, wrong one, sorry. I will entertain a motion to enter executive session under Rhode Island General Law 4246582, litigation, legal advice, teacher termination decision.
Yes, motion.
Can I have a second?
Second.